There's some battles in life you never ask for, battles that just come rolling down the highway like a runaway semi-truck, and they stop right in your driveway, demanding a fight. Well, this is the story of how an old farmer, me, had to trade his overalls for a tailored suit, his pitchfork for a legal brief, and essentially declared war on the greediest, most power-hungry little group of people you could ever imagine, the Highland Creek Homeowners Association, or simply the HOA. I'm Elias Eli Thorne, but everyone calls me Eli, and at 68 years old, I'm pretty much welded to this Thorne Legacy Ranch. All 400 acres of it, right here in the heart of the valley. We survived the Dust Bowl, we survived the Depression, and darn it, I was certainly going to survive a petty little suburban queen who decided my life was an aesthetic nuisance. My wife, June, she always called this place her green sanctuary, and keeping it whole, keeping it running after she passed, that's been my entire focus, my quiet way of honoring her memory, with only my loyal Great Pyrenees, Grizz, for company. We raise feed corn and a handful of heritage longhorns. Nothing massive, just enough to be honest work. Things were idyllic, truly, until they paved paradise right across the old county road and called it Copperwood Estates. That's where Prudence Albright moved in, Prudy, as she demanded to be called. And I swear, she looked like she was molded out of pure, unadulterated entitlement. The moment she was elected president of the Copperwood Homeowners Association, she seemed to confuse her small-time jurisdiction with the divine right of kings, and suddenly my ranch, which has been sitting outside their legal boundary since before those houses were even studs, became her personal project. Now, let me make this crystal clear, right from the jump, so there's no misunderstanding. Thorne Legacy Ranch is grandfathered in, it's outside the development's jurisdiction, and I have never, not once, signed a single piece of paper to be part of their HOA nonsense. But Prudy and her crew, they operated on the philosophy of might makes right, especially when that might was backed by the sheer nerve of people who think they know better than everyone else. The first letter was almost laughable, honestly, if it didn't feel so aggressively insulting. It cited an aesthetic variance, claiming the chipped turquoise paint on my antique chicken coop was detrimental to the neighborhood's cohesive palette, and they demanded I repaint it Mountain Mist Gray within 14 days with photographs submitted for approval. Now, that coop, that was June's favorite spot, painted that specific color because it reminded her of a trip we took to the coast 50 years ago, and seeing some stranger try to erase that memory with a form letter filled me with a deep, slow-burning indignation. I crumpled the letter up, not with rage yet, just with a weary sigh, and tossed it right onto the workbench. But Prudy, she wasn't a woman who took no for an answer, or even, I ignored your letter and now you're forgotten, which is what I'd hoped. The next week, it escalated, moving from aesthetics to something truly vile. Scent. They sent a 3-page formal complaint regarding olfactory pollution, alleging the unregulated emission of agricultural odor was making their neighborhood unlivable. Can you believe it? The smell of manure, of honest farm life, which has been the air out here for a century, was suddenly a pollution event requiring mitigation. I nearly choked on my morning coffee reading the line where they suggested I install a commercial-grade air filtration system, or failing that, an industrial atomizing deodorizer around my main cattle pen. They were mocking me. They were mocking the work, and the low, constant hum of the true conflict started in my chest. I decided I needed to see this woman face to face, off the paper, to tell her exactly where she could shove her deodorizer. I drove my old, perfectly functional, but undeniably dusty 97 Ford Ranger right over to the Copperwood Gate, past all their pristine, identical shrubbery, and found Prudy outside her own place, supervising a landscape crew. She was wearing these pristine white gloves, directing them with a manicured finger, looking utterly ridiculous. I pulled up, rolled down my window, and Grizz, bless his loud, protective heart, let out a deep, territorial bark. "Mr. Thorne," she said, not quite looking at me, but the dust my truck had kicked up on her sidewalk, her mouth tightening into a thin, unhappy line. "Your vehicle is hardly appropriate for this section. Furthermore, it falls under the purview of unregistered auxiliary equipment, and is technically an unsightly commercial transport. I laughed, a dry, rusty sound that caught her off guard. Unregistered auxiliary equipment? Prudy, this is my pickup truck. It's got a license plate and a tax stamp. It hauls feed, hay, and the occasional sick calf. It's a rancher's tool, not an eyesore. And last I checked, this isn't your property, is it? She finally met my eyes, and they were cold, truly frigid, devoid of any genuine human warmth. It may not be my property, Eli, but it is my jurisdiction. And let me assure you, the board has had quite enough of your deliberate defiance of our standards. If you want to continue living next to us, you will adhere to our community norms. Frankly, we are tired of your aging, unsightly fixtures cluttering the view. We bought here for peace, not for the sounds and smells of your relic of a business. My business is how I put food on my table and keep this land out of the hands of developers like your crew, I retorted, the heat starting to rise. And I don't answer to a committee of people who think a daisy is a code violation. Leave me alone, Prudy. She just gave me this sickeningly sweet, pitying look, the absolute worst. Well, Eli, you might want to prepare yourself for the inevitable. The board will be moving from mere suggestions to something with real consequences now. Enjoy your sunset. I slammed the truck into gear and drove away, feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of her smug certainty pressing down on me. I knew then this wasn't just about paint or manure anymore. This was about a fundamental power struggle, a declaration that their new money and their arbitrary rules were superior to my old life and my honest work. The whole thing was getting ready to explode, and I had no idea how to stop it. The atmosphere on the ranch changed. Every morning, I woke up with this tight knot in my gut, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when it dropped, it landed right on my crops. The final straw, the one that truly threatened to break my back, was the irrigation pump crisis. We rely on an old but incredibly efficient well pump to water the feed corn, especially during the peak summer months. It runs like clockwork, quietly, efficiently, from about 4:30 a.m. to 8 a.m., getting the deep watering done before the sun bakes the moisture out. Prudy's next official document, delivered by a solemn-looking young man on a bicycle. I guess she didn't want her own tires touching my nuisance property, was an emergency noise ordinance. They claimed the pump's low-frequency hum constituted a persistent nighttime disturbance that violated their sleep and wellness covenant. The ultimatum was cruel. Limit irrigation pump operation to between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., or face fines of $500 per daily violation. 11 to 3. In 100-degree heat, watering the crops then is almost useless. You're just turning expensive water into steam. It would kill the corn, ruin my harvest, and essentially starve my business out of existence. This wasn't just a fine. It was an act of economic violence, a calculated move to push me off the land so Copperwood Estates could buy this scenic adjacent parcel for a fraction of its worth. That night, I sat on my porch staring out the shadow of the pump, feeling a cold, paralyzing sense of despair. I'd never been in debt, never been late on a payment, and now this woman was trying to steal my legacy through paper cuts and code violations. I called my oldest friend, Hank Wallace, a retired county sheriff, and just vented the whole sorry saga. Hank listened, his voice rumbling on the other end, and he didn't try to sugarcoat it. Eli, you're fighting lawyers with a letter opener. You need a bigger gun, son. You need Vance and Sterling. Vance and Sterling, the legal monolith downtown, the guys who usually deal with corporate mergers and multi-million-dollar land trusts. I told Hank I couldn't afford a single hour of their time, but Hank insisted. Ask for Mr. Sterling personally. Tell him Hank sent you. He's got a soft spot for these kinds of principles, even if he hides it well. So, the next day, I put on the only decent suit I owned, a thick tweed number June had bought me for our silver anniversary, and drove downtown. The offices of Vance and Sterling were all marble, glass, and silent, expensive air conditioning. I felt like a scarecrow in a cathedral. I met Mr. Julian Sterling, a man in his late 40s who looked like he hadn't seen natural light in 20 years. He was meticulous, his demeanor radiating a quiet, dangerous intellect. I laid out the whole stack, the chicken coop fine, the odor complaint, and finally, the pump ordinance explaining how it was designed to ruin my livelihood. Mr. Sterling didn't interrupt. He didn't even tap his pen. He just absorbed every word, every piece of paper. When I was done, there was a long, heavy silence, broken only by the hum of the city far below. He finally spoke, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Mr. Thorne, what they are doing is called strategic lawsuits against public participation, or SLAP actions, often used to silence smaller landowners. It is fundamentally an abuse of corporate power, a clear violation of state right to farm laws, and frankly, a perfect example of what happens when petty people get a little bit of authority." He then looked at the pump ordinance, his eyes lingering on the 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. restriction. They aren't just trying to make noise. They're trying to destroy your crops, which is, in my view, a clear, tortious interference. I braced myself for the hourly fee. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the clarity, but my corn money won't cover a retainer here." He pushed my papers back across the polished wood desk and smiled, a truly genuine, non-corporate smile. "Mr. Thorne, my great-grandfather was a tenant farmer in Oklahoma. We don't like bullies, especially bullies who weaponize contracts against the people who actually feed this state. Vance and Sterling will take your case pro bono." My eyes went instantly warm and gritty. I just nodded, barely able to speak. "Thank you, sir. What do we do?" "We don't just defend, Mr. Thorne. We investigate, we expose, and then we go on the offense," he said, tapping the lawsuit document with a precise finger. "We will turn this into a class action suit against the entire Copperwood Estates HOA board, and specifically Prudence Albright for abuse of power, targeted harassment, and financial malfeasance." Over the next few months, Mr. Sterling's team, armed with my story, dug into the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes. And they found a gold mine of corruption. They found that Prudy and her two board cronies had been diverting funds, awarding no-bid contracts to Prudy's brother-in-law's landscaping company, and most damningly, they had been using the threat of foreclosure and legal action to buy up properties cheaply from desperate, intimidated elderly residents. The case of Mrs. Willowbrook was the one that sealed it. Prudy had used an invented fee to seize the lien on Mrs. Willowbrook's condo and flip it for a $40,000 profit for the HOA's reserve fund, making herself look like a financial genius to the rest of the community while she was robbing an old widow blind. We had the documents, the transfer slips, and Mrs. Willowbrook's tearful testimony. Prudy wasn't just petty. She was a criminal. The day of the hearing, not a small claims court, mind you, but a full county superior court hearing, because Mr. Sterling made sure the charges were serious enough, was the culmination of months of suppressed frustration. I was there, sitting bolt upright in my tweed suit, with Mr. Sterling looking like a sleek Black Panther ready to pounce. Across the aisle, Prudy Albright was wearing an expensive, tailored navy dress, flanked by a very nervous, very inadequate lawyer who kept wiping sweat from his brow. The tension was palpable, thick and hot in the air, and when Prudy took the stand, under oath, the true cinematic climax began. Mr. Sterling didn't waste time on the tractor or the cow smell. He went straight for the jugular, her claim of devaluation. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Albright, you submitted evidence, correct, stating that Mr. Thorne's nuisance-level agricultural activities have caused a significant financial devaluation of properties in Copperwood Estates?" "Prudy," smugly, "it is correct. It creates an atmosphere of instability and deters high-end buyers. My property value is suffering." "Mr. Sterling, picking up a stack of documents, I understand. Now, you testified previously that you purchased your home, Unit 12A, precisely because of the scenic, expansive views of the adjacent valley and natural habitat, correct? This natural habitat being Mr. Thorne's farm, is it not?" Prudy, hesitating, "I meant the general area. We believe the area was slated for future development." "Mr. Sterling," he turns to the judge, then back to Prudy, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Ms. Albright, please tell the court what you stated to the board in the October 2023 meeting, specifically regarding Unit 12A's current appraisal value, which was conducted after Mr. Thorne's alleged nuisance became public." Prudy's face lost all its color. She looked over at her lawyer, who just offered a pathetic shrug. She knew the game was up. It appraised at $780,000, she mumbled, barely audible. Mr. Sterling. Booming. 18 months ago, you bought that home for $710,000. That is an appreciation of $70,000. The only instability that has occurred is the instability you have created on the board. You purchased your view, knowing it was a farm. And when that view became a slight inconvenience, you attempted to use a frivolous lawsuit to silence a man's livelihood, all while your own property value appreciated because of the scenic views of the very farm you sought to destroy. The murmurs in the gallery erupted, silenced only by the judge's sharp gavel. Then, Mr. Sterling pivoted to the Willowbrook case, laying out the fraudulent transfers. He painted Prudy not just as a petty tyrant, but as a financially abusive predator. When the judge finally delivered his verdict, the air was electric. He was utterly scathing. The evidence is clear, the judge stated, leaning over the bench, his eyes fixed on Prudy. This case is not about neighborhood standards. It is about targeted harassment, abuse of power, and potentially criminal malfeasance. I rule in favor of Mr. Thorne and the plaintiffs in the class action on all counts. Furthermore, given the egregious violations of the HOA Charter and the proven predatory actions of its executive members, the Copperwood Estates Homeowners Association Board is hereby dissolved, effective immediately. All fines levied against Mr. Thorne are vacated, and the plaintiffs are awarded full restitution and punitive damages. The applause in the courtroom was immediate and deafening. I didn't cheer, I didn't shout. I just leaned back, closed my eyes, and let out the deepest, quietest sigh of relief I'd taken in years. Grizz, waiting outside with one of Mr. Sterling's paralegals, probably felt it too, because I'm told he let out one victorious woof right as the ruling came down. The aftermath was the sweetest kind of revenge, the kind that requires zero effort on my part. The settlement was significant enough to pay off the remaining mortgage on the ranch, and then some. I finally bought what Mr. Sterling had suggested, a monstrous, gleaming new tractor, a John Deere 9420R, all green and yellow, massive wheels, and a roaring engine that sounds like God clearing his throat. I named her the Verdict, and every single morning now, at 4 a.m., a full 30 minutes before my old pump even started, I fire up the Verdict, let her idle for 10 minutes, just letting that beautiful engine note roll right across the highway and into Copperwood Estates. I bet you Prudy's new silk curtains barely muffle the sound. Speaking of Prudy, her downfall was absolute. She was not only stripped of her position and forced to pay hefty restitution, but the scandal exposed her manipulative nature to the entire community. I watched her move out 3 months later. I didn't say a word. I just happened to be sitting on my porch, drinking coffee with Grizz, while a massive U-Haul pulled away from Unit 12A. Her face was pale, tight, and she wouldn't even look across the street. The irony? She sold the home for a huge loss, because who wants to buy a high-end home adjacent to a booming, loud, un-HOA-able farm? The final, silent act of revenge? I used a small portion of the settlement to become the primary sponsor of the annual County Fair Demolition Derby, held on the old track just 2 miles down the road. It's the loudest, dirtiest, most gloriously unsuburban event imaginable, and I made sure every single sign along the highway, including the one right outside Copperwood's pristine entryway, proudly featured the Thorne Legacy Ranch, a proud sponsor of Pure Noise logo. The beautiful thing about justice, sometimes, is that it's just as loud as the people who try to silence you. But I want to know what you think. When a community, driven by a few powerful voices, attempts to eradicate a legitimate, historic way of life in the name of property value, where do you draw the line? Was Mr. Sterling right to turn this into a war, or should I have just found a way to compromise? Let me know in the comments below. Is the fight for principle worth the collateral damage, or should an old farmer just let the bullies win? Don't forget to like this video, share it with anyone dealing with a stubborn HOA, and hit that subscribe button to keep up with the Thorne legacy and the sweet, sweet sound of justice. Thanks for listening, folks.